multilingual education is quite key in the century that we are, although we have moved in the world as a highly complex multilingual space. Our models are still heavily very monolingual, or rather, they're linear, they're sequential, is one thing at a time, when things have really moved in other directions. So there's a lot of mismatch between what is taught in schools or how it's taught in school and the actual realities of how people make sense of the world and make sense of who they are. That's my definition of literacy, making sense of who you are and of the world. Because multilingualism is conceived as multiple monolingualism, separated entities that you can put in closed boxes. The outcome is multilingual children, students, learners are disadvantaged. Why do multilingual people always fail everywhere they are, or are failed in our schools? Issues of epistemology, because they're made to learn through models that are not multilingual. And of course, how do you know this? Literacy is thingified, okay? It's reified as a thing that is out there. Autonomous set of skills that you just have to be really good, go get them out there. The children are made to bug at text. They don't really understand because they have to work with some sounds, and the sounds that are meaningless, which delay their cognitive development, and they get confused about who they are really in this world. Therefore, my talk is going to call for the need for integrated multilingual literacy model, complex coexistence of literacy, knows, modes, and ways of being. There's a lot of imagination. So meaning zero, sounds not connected, and we say we are illiterating the children. We are trying to make them to think. We are trying to make them to become who they should be. And this is a case for me to say, well, there's a need to reconsider some of those models. The big problems are versioning, where you take an English literacy mode or model and you plug it into an African language. The African languages, they're phonemically very transparent, and it's not something that needs the greatest attention. 80% of the curriculum is based on phonemic awareness. You do not, for 99% of the time that I know, have got monosyllabic words. So what is oral reading proficiency? It sounds to be you have to get in there. The faster you read, the better you comprehend. Is it culturally valued to speak really fast, to read the text that fast? Because I think the way you read should reflect the way people talk. So in isiZulu, for example, so you have got what would be 2, 3, 4 words becomes, when it's written, just one word. Then if you ask the child to read fast, you are creating a cognitive load. Also interestingly, because they are a call and response type of languages, so being slow and measured is highly valued. Therefore you read slowly, but the teacher of course has to finish, and they want stuff to go fast, because in English, grade 1 must read 53 words per minute. And we kind of plug and try to use that as a model for teaching other languages that value, not speed, not speed, but being slow. And I'm sure when you see people speaking, those of who went to many African countries, the politicians speak slowly in a very measured way, because that's respectable in that community. Anybody speaking too fast is almost an antithesis of the logic in that system. 80 to 95% of grade 2 readers would not be able to read a one word. 4 out of children, full sentences. Majority of these kids are 3 to 4 years delayed. And about 51, or actually more, depending on where you are, they drop out by the time they develop the sense of self, their identity affirmation around grade 10 or so. That's the time when they give away the pathways. And many of oftentimes this is often seen as an issue of poverty because they were poor and they got out of school, but they're also epistemological. You have got a schooling system that every day negates your who-ness. To summarize, most people who do research in many African contexts would come up with results that may vary in terms of numerically, but the pathway is the same, so there's a regressing curve. Matthew effect, the weaker are getting weaker in the system. You can only become less and less confident and become less and less competent if everything, all the odds are against you. When they reach high school, I'm not surprised why the grade 10s have to leave, because they are now involved in some unauthentic form of existence and thought. The whole idea of being who they are and their thinking spaces. They can't go to levels of abstraction. Okay, which is why my definition of literature about the whole idea of knowing is not only what we know, but our ways of knowing. That's the epistemological access. Monolingual is about what we know, the languages that you have. Many people are wired multilingually. In my presentation earlier this week, I spoke about children by the age of 6 who have acquired 3-4 languages. They speak a repertoire. And that becomes their way of sensing the world. They have got that complex repertoire that they use to make sense of the world. Okay? Which means highest levels of thinking, they think in that way, and there's nothing outside of that space. It's like having lens of glasses. Some people have got one-dimensional, others have a tri-dimensional. If I take your glasses and I give them to her and say, you take hers and put them over to her, the world for you is blurred, you cannot see. And that's, for me, is the actual story of high failure rate, is at the level of epistemology. Of course, the two are related, your ontological access, the nature of who you are. Simply because you are wired in that way, it defines your whole identity. One of the ancient Greek philosophers actually spoke about the curriculum. Those who master it, master themselves. And that means you grow within the remit of who you are. And that's why schooling and alliteration for me means your own self-affirmation and development. But if it's misaligned, we can predict the results. Okay, so how did we come to do we have got theories that support some of the current models of literacy? Absolutely. The cognitive efficiency mechanism, the belief that our mind is in two parts, that one is where you need to automate, and the second level is where now you have got more your working memory will become more deliberate and rational. But the quick version of this is that your mind is not able to multitask. So you gotta have to do one thing at a time, which is why you have to create building blocks. Have the sound first, disconnect it from the meaning, and then later you add up the meaning, and then you move on. Which is why in the first few years of schooling we say, let's ingrain them with sounds. Let's do it, phonics, and phonics. Why? Because they need to have all of that automated. Once it's automated, now from grade 4, what happens? Now we can now stretch and now begin to focus more on meaning and higher order thinking skills. Because at that time now they already have the base level. So we have hierarchized development in terms of the mental space. What are the results? Even in monolingual classes globally, grade 4 slump. At grade 4, the train goes down, but of course they're able to recover if you are not if you are in a monolingual situation and all of this works for you. But we know research all over the world is showing us that there's a grade 4 slump, and for me it has to do with meaning, sounds, disconnection, and delaying the kids who are very, very smart. From grade 1, I think they already speak complex sentences. Yeah, but we focus on just the word. Okay. And the next one, if that doesn't work, what happens then? The environment. All we need to change now is the environment. More input, more teachers, more hours, more books, more everything, and we believe that more is better. What it does, it drops us off the opportunity to look at the nature of the learning, okay, which has little to do with the books. And we know many cases where you can dump as many thousands of books, but if we don't think about their ways of making sense, their ways of reading the world, it doesn't quite make a difference. Minimally, yes, if we change the environment, print-rich environment, we know that works. But if it's epistemological not aligned, we still are a long way to go. Hence, the focus is on what they have, the deficit models of literacy. Now, what should we do? We talked about problems and problems and problems. We think in many African languages they have got a saying that says, stranger, come to my place so I'm complete. That's the I am because you are because we are. This complex interdependence among the African people, and that becomes the cultural competence. And we refer to this in the southern part as Ubuntu. Okay? It's a philosophy of life, it's a way of life. But we see that this is also ingrained, is part of the linguistic repertoire. They use that to make sense of the world, so to say. So one of the ideas is that we can probably use that, leverage on that, in order to begin to understand how they make sense of the world, because they're good at it. And you have got the sense of incompletion, and because of this incompletion, there has to be complex interdependence, and the rhizomes of vertical and horizontal flow. There's no terminal end and there's no real beginning. Things are there in the middle and they're happening. That's what with the repertoire talk is about, these continuous continuities, disruption of order. If I'm an outsider, it's a disruption of orderliness, but recreation of new ones at the same time. That space that looks so uncertain. I'm saying many places in the world there's confusion around multilingualism and how do you work with these many languages. But there are people who have always worked multilingually and made sense of their lives. They have that competence. So we can leverage on that. And this is what I believe should be a model for literacy in complex multilingual encounters, literally everywhere, I think. I've also, outside of the formal academia, I've started an NGO. It's called Balang Foundation, where we take children from school on Saturdays, whenever, holidays, and we put them together. We try to get them to learn, to acquire literacy in different ways from what the normal schooling system would do. Where, as you can see, two kids are sitting over there. We have got a lot of materials, books that are relevant to their age, but they have to transpose what they have in there into their own type of writing. They read the text that is in English, by the way, and they'll write that in their home language. And they have a text that is in their home language, they'll write that out in English. So it's a deliberate, intentional juxtaposition of the literacy, the work, the readings that they have actually from their schools. So this is what you have. We see that they become really creative. We unleash creative geniuses. They can write a paragraph here in a particular language and continue the same meaning in a different one. It's not the pristine models of what the structures look like. The sense making, do they make sense? And how does that make them feel? So the texts are leaking into one another, which is not the normal thing. They transform the text. This is one of the texts that was written in an African language, Sepedi. They say, Mweno lesejo sa Bakhaga, which is the clan, the traditions of the Bakhaga clan. And the kids read the book because they also have to write it in that same language. In other words, they become both monolingual and multilingual at the same time. Then they rewrite the text, the title, and they say, no, the author should have actually said, which is circumcision of the Bakhaga. That shows highest level of thought. They thought deeply and they're able to transform. We also transform the role of the teacher, not being a teacher, but a learner. So you go into the classroom every day to be surprised, just like the kids would be, and you become a learner, feeling exactly what they do. So it takes away the hierarchy of a teacher out there, because I know the language, I'm going to put it down on you. They can bring a language that the teacher probably is not very comfortable or quite familiar with. This is the Ubuntu cultural competence. I'm just re-emphasizing the idea of knowing and being. And in conclusion, we actually move from fixity to fluidity. For me, this is an epistemological shift, moving to what people do with languages and not what a language looks like. What people do with their literacies, not what the structures look like. Literacy, not a conglomeration of autonomous skills capable of being placed in closed boxes. We caution the validity of sequential linear models of literacy. And for this reason, we can speak about Ubuntu literacy as a complex and indefinite relations of dependency. Is it important to still have academic language? You have got languages that you have, African languages that you know, and you need that to access meaning, knowledge epistemically. It's an interplay between the two, and in my talk I kept talking about that multilinguals becoming monolinguals and moving back from monolingualism to multilingualism. So they will still need to acquire standard, whatever that you call academic language. The question is how do they get there? Okay? They're not getting there in silo as a separated thing that you get, otherwise they never reach there. And this is where we are. They're not getting that. Okay? So we need all these other ways of getting there. I was not sure about the interpersonal and textual, if that was a question or just a commentary.
Well, it was just a revelation to me, really.
Okay. All right, thank you for that, for the comment. There was a question, why is phonics still, well, that's a big question, really. It's about the habits. We form habits, and it's good to stay in the comfort zone, and we don't want to venture because change is pain. It means you must get out of that system. By the way, even in what you might call monolingual context, where maybe the phonics to some degree make a lot of sense, research is increasingly showing that it accounts for 15% or so of your literacy acquisition, and yet 80% phonics.
Because it doesn't actually necessarily, as you were talking about, it doesn't help comprehension.
Not really.
The whole point of reading is comprehension.
It's understand. Have fun, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about habits, and it's about the changes in the system, the education, the language literacy policy, and money, and all other kinds of issues that come in the way. But mainly it's about the habit. We are so comfortable, and we have been trained in particular ways. So change always becomes the pain, the most painful thing that human beings don't want to subject themselves to. It's just natural that we want to stay there, no matter how much we know, but the doing is always the hardest, because we are changing our lived realities. How do you teach the Ubuntu way? How do you teach meaning, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
That was our question.
No. I meant, is there something written
Okay.
which a class teacher or even a teacher trainer in
Okay.
particular
Okay.
could read in
Okay.
order to be able to start applying
I get
it
you.
themselves?
I hear you. This is work that is ongoing. There has been publications, of course, in academic journals about the logic, about the Ubuntu way of knowing, but translating that into a workbook for a teacher is work that is not yet done, and it's a project that probably needs to take off as soon as is possible. Okay? But we do go out and we train teachers, we do in-service teacher support, but you're very right, we need to support this with something they can lay their hands on. The story is not that you completely don't have to deal with forms in a way. It's the orientation, yes. More emphasis is given on one. It's not a complete shut the business, take away everything else. In the Ubuntu, that's why people still would write, okay? They'll still write in some type of a form. You do that, so there is a form that but you also go way, way beyond that.
So you don't just use the phonics, which is what happens in some.
Which, yeah. I mean, when you walk into the classrooms, you see a big letter A,
Yeah.
B, and then next you see is letters, and or when you see words, these words are not connected. Okay, so there's a word there, and there's a word there, and there's a word there, but they're so disintegrated that they make no sense for the child if these words could be much more meaning-based. Because I think these kids already speak, they already understand, and if we can try to match their level of thinking at that level. And I think what we put in there, even as you call it print environment, doesn't quite match the thinking level of the children.